start recording.
Perfect.
Excellent. And I'll let you have one as well. Well, thank you again for talking to me at Run Ultra. We've got lots of members who have all sorts of questions for you. There's lots of stuff that we'd like to find out about you as well.
But, sorry, can you still hear Si in the background talking?
Yes.
Loads of background noise. Yeah, let's.
Is that him? I wasn't sure if that was him or. Oh, he is. Oh no, I don't get access to his his microphone.
I think maybe it's off.
Though. I think he's turned it off.
Yeah, I think it's good now. Perfect.
Okay, cool. Obviously, we know where it all started at the Marathon des Sables in 2017. Was that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Am I right? I've been trying to do a little bit of digging. Am I right in thinking you did actually do it before?
No.
Okay.
No, that was my first.
That was your first.
Yeah, that was my first ever Marathon des Sables, first ever ultra marathon.
First ever ultra as well. It's amazing, isn't it?
Where it all started, yeah.
There's no entry requirements, is there? I think
nothing at all. One of very few races that you can just do off the back of things. Yeah.
Yeah, not one that is on my list.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't on mine.
Another thing I was very interested in, and I'm sure other people would like to know about your training. You've said that you generally train in 12-week blocks.
Yep.
Is that something you still generally do?
Yeah, normally. So I guess it really kind of depends on the A race and what the goal is. And for me, so typically I'll race 2, maybe 3 A races or key races a year. But I like racing and use smaller races as a good either test workout or just a really good workout or just an opportunity to race because I enjoy racing. And yeah, it's just a nice way to close the training block. So depending on what the race is, the first 12-week block of that build up might be sort of working on sort of speed, or it might be working on climbing or sort of a big endurance block. But normally it's a little bit less specific to the overall race, but just setting the foundations and laying the groundwork so that when you do go into the specific training block, you're in a much better shape and a much better place to start. And you can, excusing the pun, you can hit the ground running when you get into the main bulk of the training for it. And yeah, I just think for me, I find it's a really good way. It helps me to stay really motivated, because I think if you sort of took yourself off like, oh, you've got a 24-week block, it's just really long, and sort of, yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but at the beginning that light seems pretty dark.
Yes, quite far away.
But actually, if you break it into a 12-week block, and typically for us, you'll do a sort of 3 weeks of 3-week build up and then have a bit of a down week. So everything's just broken down into sort of small, manageable sections, just to make things sort of more, to seem and to feel more achievable. And the training then becomes, you can sort of see yourself going through it. And once a week's done, actually that's sort of a pretty big section of it. It's a pretty big block. Whereas, a long training block just sort of seems really daunting. And when you sort of plan everything down, it seems mad. So I think it's easy to stay focused and stay motivated.
That does kind of lead me into a question I was going to ask you a bit later, actually, with your new focus for the London Marathon. And I see that has now been confirmed as the Olympic qualifier.
Yeah.
Now that things are very different, and that is such a long-term goal, how can you help maintain that focus and that momentum when we can't be out there racing and doing those little time trials and things that help us keep us?
Yeah, it is a really tricky one. For me, one of the sort of main reasons why I like having something to focus on, I like having goals set. And for me, typically and sort of predominantly, that has been races on the trails, but I just can't see an international trail race happening. Yes, I'm sure there will be some races that happen in Europe this year, I think coming from the UK, that's going to be pretty unlikely. And then the repercussions, if you do leave the UK, then coming back into the UK. And for me, my partner is also a professional athlete, and for us to have to both be in self-isolation for 2 weeks afterwards, for me, the risk is not worth the reward, which is a real shame. And if there are small trail races that happen in the UK, then fantastic. I'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And yes, the focus is on the marathon for now, and yes, the overall goal would be to go to Tokyo 2021. But I guess the overall goal and my long-term focus will always be on the trails.
Okay.
And I think the step forward for me from being able to run a fast road marathon that maybe, that we'll see how fast it is. And if it's good enough, brilliant. And if it's not, I'll be able to get back onto the trails in better shape, a better athlete, and be able to go back and enjoy the trails. No, exactly. And actually now the one of the sayings that I use is control the controllables. And for me, I live in Loughborough, and if I want to train sort of on sort of big trails and get a lot of climbing in, it's an hour drive to the Peak District. Yeah, which is amazing. And before lockdown, that was something that I did twice a week, every week for the last year at least. But now for me, the risk versus reward, it's just not been worth it. So it's been like, right, what can I focus on? What can I control? And for me, the marathon is it's something completely different. And I think nowadays the quality of ultra running is going through the roof, and the quality of trail running is going through the roof. And actually to be able to run a fast marathon definitely isn't the be all and end all, but actually if you can then convert that onto the trails for whether it's 50k or 100k 100-mile racing, it is only going to help. And I think you're so close. For me, you're just so close to that. With a marathon, you're so close to that red line for the whole race. And in trail racing, it's very easy to go above it, but it's very easy to stay under it. And actually staying just beneath where you need to be, just below that red line, is really difficult. And no one really knows where it is. So you do a race, like I was really happy with my race at Western States last year, finishing just under 15.
Yeah.
But there were
bang on your time as well.
Yeah, exactly. There were probably bits that I went a little bit too hard, and then other bits I went a little bit too easy, and it kind of equaled out at maybe about right. But could I have gone 15 minutes quicker? Could I have gone 30 minutes quicker? And actually, who knows? But I think with this, I've already learned so much about myself in a 6-week marathon block so far, that I'm really, really excited about translating that from road running back onto the trails and into the mountains and into the ultra distances, because I think it's going to make me a way more rounded athlete. And it will sort of highlight the strengths that I've got. And I'm super, super excited about sort of getting some quality road running done now while I can, before the trails are fully open, and then being able to get back onto the trails, because actually in the UK, we are still a long way away from competitive racing. And I think like I said earlier, control the controllables, and being able to run on the road is something that's going to be open, I think, before the trail is. So for me,
it's a bit safer as well.
Exactly. But also and people have been asking, why I've been doing it sort of, but actually for me, running high volume on the trails, because I'm pushing pretty hard, I need treatment for it. I need to see a physio once a week. I need to get a sports massage once a week. And actually at the moment, that's not possible. The risk versus reward, it's just not there. Like, yes, being at one with nature is amazing, and getting onto the trails where it's not as crowded is amazing. But actually, you twist your ankle and you need a month's worth of physio, or you need to go get an MRI scan, or for worst case scenario, you need an operation. In the UK, that's not happening at the moment. So
very hard.
it's, for me, it's just not worth.
Bad enough for a normal person, let alone a professional athlete that needs that maintenance anyway. Yeah.
Precisely. And
Wow.
I want to be doing this in 10 years time. And yes, a year is incredibly frustrating, but at the end of it, and yes, I'm a professional athlete, this is how I make a living. It's incredibly frustrating, but actually being healthy and being a good ambassador for the sport for me is so much more important than a short-term good performance. So yeah, I think just, and with ultra running, patience is probably the word that's used most in elite ultra distance trail running, is be patient. And that's what we've got to do at the moment, because people just.
Do you think you've learned from past elite runners? I'm thinking more specifically in America, where their training was so intense that they burnt out quite quickly. Do you have a sort of an eye on them and just think that's not where I'm going?
Yeah, and I see, yes, I'm on Strava and I'm friends with a lot of the guys who are based in Flagstaff and speak to them couple of times a month maybe, and I have been there to train, and their way of training is brilliant. It works for some people, it doesn't work for other people. Sometimes you rock up to race and you're in amazing shape, other times you're completely burnt out. And for me, with my training, as with my racing, consistency is the key. Like I don't, you can't, racing 2 or 3 times a year, you can't afford, yes, you are going to have bad days, but you want to try and limit that, and you want to have as good a day as possible 2-3 times a year. And that's what you're going to be remembered by, going to a race, doing as well as you possibly could, and then coming back to another race 4 months later. And my approach that I've taken is definitely not a sort of lots of swings and yeah, sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't work. I'm like, well, no, I want it to work 9 times out of 10. But having said that, what they're doing, I do admire it, because if you don't try, you'll never know. But yeah, I think for longevity in the sport, I think a more sensible approach. Yes, you may not hit your peak as quickly, but actually, do you want to hit your peak quickly? Because what goes up must come down, and I'd rather it sort of be a nice steady gradient to the top.
Well, and you still have a recovery day a week.
Pretty much, like, and my recovery day probably looks slightly different to most people's. Like I still run on my recovery day. I think just because I'm so used to it and so conditioned to it, and I'm not running because I feel like I have to run. I'm running because I want to run, and it's the one run a week that I really don't pay attention to a watch, or I don't pay attention to really to what my heart rate is doing or anything. I just run completely to feel. And if it feels good, then I'll run, whether it's 20 minutes or whether it's 45 minutes. I just run because I enjoy it. And I'd sort of go out with Soph, my partner, or take the dogs out. And yeah, and I think it's so important. And what I've sort of really learned during this marathon phase is, yeah, a rest day may not necessarily be a total day off, but actually if you train on, so my rest days or my easy days are on Thursday. So this morning I did a hard workout this morning. I will run again. My run on Thursday. Tomorrow on my rest day will probably be around lunchtime ish. So actually I've got more than a 24-hour period now. And actually being a professional, being a full-time athlete, you can have 24 hours between workouts. You can have a full rest day in between 2 training sessions, because I'm currently sat on the sofa, and we'll finish this call, I'll have lunch, I'll have a 2-hour nap, I'll get up, I'll go to the gym and do some recovery, I'll have my dinner, and I'll go to bed. Like, it's not, I don't know if
so bad.
it's an amazing lifestyle, but it's not the most glamorous lifestyle. And I think what people don't realize is it is like going to work, because you go, and yes, you're fortunate enough that you're going to work is putting your trail shoes on and going and running, but then it's doing the hard things. It's I could sort of yes, I'm at home all day, and yes, there are loads of distractions. I could put the telly on, I could do whatever, but actually it's like, no, from 2 till 4, I am going to sleep, and my phone's going to stay downstairs, and I'm going to pull the blackout blinds down, and I'm going to sleep, and I'm going to do my very best to sleep for 2 hours, because that's what I need to do for my job to be as good as I possibly can be.
Yeah.
And
Focused.
yeah, and it is focused, and it's focused in a very different way. And people are like, oh, it's lazy. You sleep in the afternoons. That's super easy. It's like, well, yeah, it is, and it's a lifestyle choice I've made. But actually, I do the same on Saturday, and I do the same on Sunday when people who typically go to work are sort of enjoying themselves and are out sort of doing bits and pieces. And yeah, it is focused and it is dedicated. But actually, for me and for where I want to be in the sport of trail running, it's that sacrifice, and yeah, it's a necessary sacrifice to make to be at the top of my game.
Coaching. Did I see on Twitter you're joining Team Project Run?
Yep. So so I've been coaching a couple of athletes for maybe the last 18 months, just because I really enjoy it. I understand programming, and to see people improving into whether they want to compete in a race, or they want to just complete a race, or they want to lower their half marathon time or anything, being able to help someone achieve that goal for me is really rewarding. And certainly in lockdown, one thing that I've realized, and sort of it's been magnified during lockdown, is you need to have something outside of, whether it's outside of the sport or it's outside of your own performance in the sport, to distract you. So for me, coaching is, yes, it's very similar to running, but actually I get to do research about it. I get to sort of analyze other people's data, and I really enjoy it. For me, it's a way, yes, it's very similar to running, my own running, but it's different enough that it doesn't feel like, it's not a hassle, it's not an effort. I'm not worried about my performance on my sessions. It's a really nice way to switch off.
You can focus on someone else.
Yeah, but which I think is really nice. And yeah, sort of like during lockdown, like we've sort of redone bits of the house. We've foolishly enough got a little flock of chickens now, and I think,
the best, aren't they?
Oh, it's incredible. It's an absolute game changer. And sort of now everyone that we see sort of leaves with 6 eggs. And yeah, it's been amazing. And so I'm really excited to start coaching with Team Project Run. And the way that and the coaching is going to be, yes, it's not going to be necessarily, it won't be the same sessions that I do, but it's going to be a very different way of approaching racing, training very specifically, and will look different to, I don't know, 80-90% of how other ultra runners train. The volume will be less, the speed will probably be a little bit more. And I think, I've not done enough training for this. And it's like, well, it's pretty much following exactly what I have done. And yes, what works for one person may not work for another person. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to being able to impart some of the knowledge that I built up from 10K distance in cross country to 100-mile distance at Western States, and get people one step closer to achieving their goals.
It's quite a breadth.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. And you look at people like, it's not really been done before. And yes, sort of in trail running, it hasn't been. But there was an athlete in the Cold War called Emil Zapatek, who in the 1952 Olympics won the 5K, the 10K, and the marathon. First time and only time it's ever been done.
Really?
And to be able to go, yes, sport has changed since then, but it's still the same principle. And yeah, if you're able to do it then from 5K to the marathon, then
why not?
Yeah, precisely. Like it adds so much. I know if I get into the last 5-10K of a trail race and it's going to be a fast finish, you kind of know that you've got the speed, or you've got the endurance, and you're going to be feeling hopefully okay that actually you can keep pushing because you've done that training. And actually, I think it is really important now that the level of competition has got up. It's really important.
Speed is becoming more important.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think it's relative speed. I think when people hear speed, it's I need to be a quick 100-meter runner. It's like, no, but actually, does running a not an amazing 10K, but does running a good 10K pay dividends when you're on the trails? Yes, 100%. And actually, if you look at the top ultra trail runners at the moment, everyone could probably run. I'd say 90% could probably run sub 30, 31:30 for a 10K, which is good, and which is really good. And there are probably a small handful who would run under 30, and maybe one or two who'd run under 29. And actually, yes, that might not. Who the person who can run the quickest 10K probably won't win UTMB, but they might. It's and I think it's really, really interesting. But you take it to a running race like Western States, and actually being able to run a quick marathon or a quick half marathon is really, really useful, and will pay huge dividends during the race.
The trails on the Western States, so that they're a lot more runnable, are they not, than UTMB? Or I mean, the quality of the trail is.
They are, very runnable, very fast.
There's no picking away over the rocks.
They're your sort of typical, what you would imagine someone says about a nice, you go for a nice run in a park.
Yeah.
That's your sort of, and yes, there are bits that are a bit steeper and a bit rocky and you've got to pay attention. But the vast majority is, you don't need to look down. You're running normally. You might as well be running on the road.
That's quite a difference, isn't it?
It's huge. And that's the difficult thing with trail running and ultra running. If someone says, I'm a professional trail runner, great. What distance is that? And you go down the trail route, right? Are we looking at non-technical American trails, or are we looking at are we looking at are we looking at fell running, or are we looking at UTMB, or are we looking at a really technical sky race like Livigno, or are we looking at, and if you look in ultra distance, are we talking about Western States, or are we talking about the 100-kilometer road world championships, or are we talking about UTMB, or are we talking about multi-stage racing? There is so much difference. And because there's not a overall race series or an overall governing body, how can you compare a win at Western States and a win at UTMB? Both amazing. But who's the better trail runner?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Same distance.
Yeah.
One's taken probably 8 hours less for the same distance.
Yeah.
But it's a 100-mile trail race. So how do you? And I think that's the really difficult thing. And like, yes, there is an Ultra Trail World Tour, but it doesn't quite work. According to the Ultra Trail World Tour, I don't rank on it because I've not done enough races. So I am zero.
Specific races, isn't it, that you have to do?
Yeah, in a 3-year period. So I am. I do not have a ranking. So if I don't, according to the Ultra Trail World Tour, I am I'm a mid to backpacker.
Yeah.
But have won three Ultra World Tour races. So it's a funny one.
The International Trail Running Association is the closest we have to something that's trying to bring everything together.
Yeah, and that's great, because that's on a ranking, but they don't sort of hold races, and it's a really funny one. I actually think in the next couple of years we're going to see a pretty big change with the athletes having a little bit more of a voice, because the athletes want to know who is the best. We want to be able to because you go to a race and great, you may win a race, but actually not everyone's going to be there, because if you take the Western States weekend, for example, you have Adidas Infinite Trails that I will be at, and all the other Adidas Terex athletes will be at. You have Lavaredo, you have Western States, and you have Marathon de Mont Blanc, all on the same weekend.
Okay, yeah. There needs to be some form of grading, doesn't there?
Yeah.
Across the trails or something like that.
So yeah, really interesting. Yeah. So I think the sport is I think the sport will it's incredible, and it's sort of almost become a victim of its own success, because now you could race every weekend on the trails anywhere in the world,
and because it's so accessible to everyone as well,
and that's it. Which is incredible.
Yes, there's no other sport really that can offer that to, that I could race in the same race as you. There's no other sport out there really, is there, that can offer that?
And if trail running is your sport, if rugby was your sport, for example, then yes, you could go and you could watch the All Blacks play, but you couldn't play with them. You couldn't sort of throw a ball around with them. But actually, you go to UTMB, you're going to, let's say you have a particular favorite athlete or favorite brand, you can go and do a shakeout run with them. You can go and to a signing session and meet the people and get a photo with them. You're then stood on the start line next to them. And I think that's the really special thing about the sports. And I think it's the thing that will make the sport grow. And I think then people realize that actually the elite athletes are not just elite athletes, they are also humans. They have a normal life. They most probably still have a job. But it's just it's their passion. So yeah, I think the sport is in an incredibly exciting place, and I think it will look very different in the next sort of 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that kind of brings me on to, what do you think then this growing and mass participation the environmental effect it will have on the trails out there? And what do you think we can do about that?
Yeah, I think it is a really big issue. And I saw Xavier Therenard has said that he's not going to be doing any races in the US because it's too far, and it's too far to travel by plane. And he wants to limit what he's doing. So yeah, I think sort of the big hand things like that will become more of a thing. And whether it's sort of one year it's sort of trail running for elite athletes is hosted in the US, and yes, you still got to get over there. You get over there, but you then stay there for 2, 3, 4 months, and you do 2, 3, 4 races, and then you come back at the end of the season, or the same in Europe. But yeah, I think sort of at a more grassroots level, like yes, more pounding on the trails, you're sort of bringing more people to the same place. Like yes, it's going to break down the trails, potentially more litter, and sort of a bit more sort of disturbing of the wildlife. But actually, I think the great thing about the trail running community is that exact thing. It's the community. And yeah, it doesn't really happen quite so much in the UK, but in the US, for example. So in order to get a place in Western States, you have to have done a certain amount of community service equivalent on the trails, of restoring trails or doing trail work, they call it.
Oh, wow.
Which is amazing. So cool. Great. You've got a place in this race. You paid $450 to enter, and that's including elite athletes who have been invited to race. Yeah, mega. Thanks very much. But brilliant, because it's as it should be. It's the same for everyone. And it's got to be a level playing field. You carry the same kit. Your race entrance is the same. And I think for me, that's really important. But yeah, you do 8 hours of trail work and make sure the trail is in as good a condition as possible, whether that's sort of repairing bits that there's been some erosion, or it's clearing some weeds that are crossing the road, or stinging nettles or anything in the UK. And that doesn't really happen as much in the UK at the moment, but the sport is sort of still in its
okay. Yeah, interesting.
Years. So yeah, I think there is a certain amount that is being done, but there is definitely more that can, should, and will be done in the future.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'm sure you've got many wish list races to do. Have you got anything? Yeah, there must be so many as your ambitions are so varied. I mean, is there any particular race out there that you
Yeah,
think?
I think, and like you say, it's so difficult, and because races are so different, races are so
Mm,
individual. I guess for me, sort of the best year for me, I guess, would be being able to race a road marathon at the beginning of the year, then win UTMB, and then go and medal at the European Cross Country Championships. To be so, to have such strength in diversity of running styles and differences, and
yeah.
that's kind of my goal for next year, is to see what I can do in the marathon and go as quick as I can, and then if in all likelihood, like, yes, I'd love to qualify for Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's going to be a race on the day. We'll see. But I would like to run quick, but I'm not expecting anything. But then to be able to 2 months later to be able to do a race like uh, Transvolcania or Trans Gran Canaria,
Oh yeah,
and
that's.
to be able to do really well in that race, that will
Mm,
then sort of set me up nicely for Lavaredo and UTMB, and then on to something in the winter. Or actually, if you look at a year like 2022 and we plan out sort of
mm,
quite far in advance, or 2021 first, that you've got also 2022 you've got the Commonwealth Games, you've got the European Championships, and you've got the World Championships. So three major marathons for a English or GB runner
okay.
within the space of 6 weeks in the summer, 8 weeks before UTMB. So is
That's
there a
that,
reason?
that's
Which is
pushing
amazing.
the training race to the limit a bit.
It is, but I don't think it's impossible. Like, yes, you couldn't probably perform at your very, very best in both of them, but actually, if you're prepared to say, actually, right, in the marathon, I just want a really good training session and take a week off afterwards.
Mm,
Actually, a 7-week training block, if you've already done a lot of the work before, you can afford to be flexible with. And
yeah.
yeah, for me to be able to be diverse and running things like that, running fast on the road, fast cross country, in order to run faster on the trails, for me is really important. It's the message that I really want to show to people, that, like, certainly for UK based athletes, it's or UK based runners, if you sort of call yourself a trail runner, a lot of your running is still going to be on the road, because we haven't got these immense trail network systems all over the place. And actually, if you are going for a trail run, probably a mile or two are going to be on the road, and actually you can
Yeah.
get a lot of trail specific work done on the road and in the gym.
I think
And
it's quite nice to mix it up anyway.
yeah,
Sometimes
so do
it's
I.
nice
I
not
think
to
it's
have to
really
think about
important.
where you put your foot.
Yeah, and I think it's brilliant. And for me, like, I'm passionate about running, not just
Mm,
trail running. I'm
mm,
passionate about running, and I want to get as many people into the sport of running as possible. Yes, I'd love that to be on the trails, but actually, I think
mm.
if you live in San Francisco, for example, and you sort of run down by the water one day, and then the next you can run in the hills, and then yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think actually that makes you a stronger person, mentally and physically, but also a stronger athlete.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's really important to be varied, and it keeps you interested and keeps you in the sport for a longer time.
Cool. I've had some another question in off Twitter, whether you want to go back to any races to improve, whether it's something like Western States or South Downs Way. Um,
Yeah, I think for me, South Downs Way, yeah, it's probably the most grassroots
mm,
level race that I would do. And because you've only got, I want as well as I possibly can there. For me, South Downs Way is an A race. and that's sort of one of 2 or 3 races a year. So you need to make it count. And it kind of, as a professional athlete that you make your living off, it sounds terrible, but it needs to be worth your while. But yeah, for me, South Downs Way, definitely, I think the day that I ran, it was pretty quick, but I think the shape that I'm in now, I think I could take 10, 15 minutes off it.
What about the 100?
Yeah, definitely. The 100 is definitely a race that I really want to do. And I think Centurion do such an amazing job. So yeah, that definitely in the UK. Marathon des Sables, definitely. I think
really?
I think it's such a winnable race. I think if you approach it really professionally and with the knowledge and the understanding that I've built up over the last couple of years, I think it definitely won't be easy. It'll be incredibly challenging, and you have a bit of a target on your back from day one. But I think it is doable. And Western States, 100%. Yes, I was really happy with my performance last year, but it's very much still unfinished business.
There's still room for manoeuvre.
Yeah.
Well, it's a classic question, but it has to be asked. Bob Graham, you might have a pop at that.
I'd absolutely love to. I think for me, I would like to cement myself in the sort of world of trail running and ultra running first, and focus slightly more on performance in quantifiable races, certainly for the next couple of years, and rather than this person's doing the Bob Graham. Like, kind of when Killian came and did it, like, it was for him, it was the right time to do it, because he's built up he's an icon in the sport. And do I think I'll ever get to Killian's level? Probably not, but actually I think another couple of years, build up a bit more experience, and then be able to give it a really good go. But I think it is probably the most British running thing. I think the record should be held by a Brit. So if it's not me and it's another Brit that I can help to get there, then fantastic. Because
all the Wainwright rounds.
And I think that's the exciting thing about the UK, and it means nothing to anyone else outside the UK, but actually as a community of runners in the UK, it's a big thing.
You know what it takes.
Definitely something that I'd love to put my name towards.
Yeah, that's. Do you think, where you say that you would want to do more quantifiable races first, do you think the racing gives you a little bit more of a challenge and a motivation because you're competing against others, versus a sort of challenge where it's more of a timed against yourself?
I think it's a really difficult one, and to be honest, I probably don't see it that differently. But I think in order to be big in the sport and to help inspire people sort of on a global level to participate in trail running, I think being able to do it at races where you're being, yes, I don't compare myself to other people, but you are being in a race, you are being compared to other people. That's what it is. And I think there are definitely some races that I would love to do and to hopefully do well in before giving these challenges a go, because doorbell. It's all right. There are a lot of races that I'd like to do, because I think it's really important to be able to then go into these challenges with a bit of a reputation, but also a solid base that
I get
you
that.
you are a known quantity.
That makes sense.
Sorry, dog's barking at the Ring doorbell.
That's fine. No, don't worry. I've just got one sort of main last question I'm curious about. Well done on your 3 Peaks treadmill challenge. You. I was interested to see that you.
He's determined to see my face. Hey, shush, Rox. Stop. Sorry. Taylor loves barking at the doorbell.
We've got a show. They're guarding.
Yeah. Thank you. 2 books that required me to get up. Never mind. Never mind. At least they're safe now.
Oh, mine just get thrown over the wall. You're lucky.
Yeah, I know. That's what normally happens with the fragile things. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. So I think you said you took on only 60 grams of carbs and 80 milligrams of caffeine.
Yeah.
Is that a sort of training thing where you're trying to do a sort of like a fasted run and therefore improve your performance so that when you do race and take on more nutrition, it will have a greater effect? Or are you just trying to get better at running on less? What's the thinking there?
Kind of none of them. I think those are sort of the answers that people would expect and does for me, like, does make sense, people doing that. For me, it was more of a, what happens to my body, what happens to my performance if I don't eat. And because there'll be some races that your stomach is really bad, and if that happens, then how far and how hard can you push without consuming anything? If your stomach's bad for 2 hours, can you go without eating anything for 2 hours? Or what if you drop a gel or you miss a checkpoint timing or something, and you don't get the chance to eat? So yeah, it was a little bit of an experiment, because everyone is so individual. Like, I read a lot of sports science and a lot of papers about nutrition and sort of fueling and endurance sport, but every sentence or every paragraph starts with sort of, for this person, or like, nutrition and fueling is such an individual thing. Yes, your weight and your height make a difference to it, but there are so many more. So actually the chemical processes going on inside your body are so different, and actually what your body needs in order to sustain itself from one person to the next is so different, even in 2 elite trained athletes, is so different.
But there must be a minimum. Yeah, basic minimum you need.
Yeah, very much so. But for a 50 kilo athlete and for an 80 kilo athlete, it will be incredibly different. If your body's used to eating 3,000 calories a day, or if your body's used to eating 2,000 calories a day or 6,000 calories a day, it will make a huge difference. And for me, yeah, it was just a bit of a self-experiment to see what happens when I get tired and I don't have fuel.
Was that nice way in one shot, the 60 grams?
No, it was in a sports drink.
Oh, it was just in a drink, was it?
Yeah, it was in a drink. And sort of, I've started doing a lot more of my fueling, for anything sort of less than 6 hours. 6 hours would all be done on sports drink.
Wow.
And then after that would then sort of move on to gels. But actually, having said that, at Western States, it was 90% liquid, just because it's so hot and you need to put it in your body. So you might as well sort of get more bang for your bucks and kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, hydrate at the same time.
Yeah, and reduce the risk of having any sort of gastro problems.
I think that is, yes, I wonder, is that a higher risk as a professional, that your system is working at a much higher level and therefore your sort of food intake or your stomach was liable to reject solids?
Yeah, I think so. The less that you put in, the more that you put in, the more chance you are of having stomach issues. So especially if you're working at a high level, which is why during a marathon or somewhere where you're running so close to that red line, so many people get stomach issues, and more people will get stomach issues running close to the red line than they will running easy. And yeah, if you can train you can train yourself to a certain extent, but actually it's finding out what your body is capable of doing. which there are some lessons that are great learning from other people. And there are a lot of lessons that you can learn from other people. There are some lessons that you just have to learn yourself, and you have to make those mistakes. And I'd much rather make those mistakes during training in the safety on a treadmill than make those mistakes on one of 3 races a year that really count.
No, well, that's cool. That's fantastic. I think that's pretty much covered everything I had. Thank you very much.
No problems.
Last but not least, I was going to ask you, but I think I requested to follow you on Strava, and I see you are Garmin, not Suunto.
Yeah.
That's always...
Yeah, I think for me, I've used everything. Started with Garmin, then went to try Suunto, and then used Coros for a little bit, and now back.
They're a new and upcoming one, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're big in the US, and they are really good. I just didn't find it sort of that user friendly. Everything's sort of done on a dial, and I just didn't. It was probably just a bit different. I just didn't really get on with it. And yeah, now back to Garmin, and I'm a Garmin athlete, and I genuinely think it's the best product. And I think the GPS is good on it. It's not perfect, but then again, neither is anything. And I think you can only and the features on it's probably like a MacBook laptop. I reckon I use 5% of what it's capable of, but that 5% is really useful for what I do. I think it's a great tool, and for me the Garmin is I'd run with it. Just here. I think they're brilliant. They are brilliant.
Yeah, cool. Well,